Welcome to Human Talk, where I speak with the people shaping the future of technology. I'm your host, Liliana Muscarella. These conversations explore the human side of innovation, including values, visions, and the choices that define our digital world. Hello, and welcome to Human Talk by Human Tech. Today I'm speaking with Joshua Dávila, better known as the Blockchain Socialist, whose work challenges us to think differently about crypto's purpose and future. As an author, podcaster, and co-op builder, Josh invites us to imagine how decentralized systems can actually serve human needs and how we can make that a reality. Let's do it. So, I guess the first question would be if you could, tell me a little bit about yourself, how you kind of um, fashioned yourself and also maybe like embodied this idea of like blockchain socialist, of course, maybe sort of what moments in your life led up to this, sort
Mhm.
of a overall background would be great.
Yeah, sure. So, depends on how far back you want me to go, but I think at least for me, the creation of the blockchain socialist logo or brand or whatever you want to call it, like it makes me cringe whenever people call it a brand, but I guess it kind of is, whether I like it or not. But it just kind of came out of my own frustrations of feeling like there wasn't a very good left wing analysis and critique of the crypto space in a way that resonated with me, who was like fairly like up to date with it, keeping up with it, into it even. And so after a couple of years of kind of being frustrated and waiting for someone else to start some sort of like, I guess the thing that I do now, I decided, fuck it, I'll do it myself. And I bought a domain for the website and made a Twitter account and made a subreddit in just kind of like out of frustration, like out of like wanting to really just like express ideas that I had that I didn't have any other outlet for. I was working a corporate job, but like was living a kind of double life as like reading political theory, after after going to my corporate job, um, and of course that place was not going to give me a space to kind of express the types of ideas that I wanted to be into and to pursue. So yeah, basically now it's been 5-ish years that I've been doing it, of just either writing, making podcasts or videos, releasing basically every week for the past 4 or 5 years. So that's just kind of been a part of my routine at this point. Yeah. So I don't know if there's like more. I think that this particular intersection of left wing theory stuff and crypto and blockchain stuff it's a niche. Like it's not very many people that are like
The
particularly
Venn diagram
in
is small.
yeah. I mean, I think it's definitely growing, or it's the ideas definitely have proliferated, I think. the but it's like, yeah, it's kind of like take one kind of complex thing and another pretty complex thing and then put them together, and of course it's not going to be like a huge overlap of people, but it's also okay. I think I think I kind of knew that was going to happen going into it. But yeah, I found it a very like fruitful and interesting kind of space to explore ideas that are seldom explored in either space kind of individually.
Hmm.
um
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, absolutely. And I guess kind of the by the fact that it is like two very traditionally disparate
Yeah.
fields or sets of ideas, it kind of gives you, I guess, a lot of content also to explore, to be able to make this your sort of, I assume, full-time job the past 4 or 5 years. So I guess it works. And I guess kind of, yeah, going back to maybe a little bit your background, but also just more generally, um, what sort of maybe evolute or what got you, I guess, first interested into this sort of intersection of ideologies or sets of ideas?
Mhm.
And then how also have you maybe seen kind of this evolution of like how blockchain was either conceptualized or started or kind of had this uptake originally, and then what it's being used for today, particularly as far as this sort of like cooperative community, sort of, I
Mhm.
guess, radical, potentially leftist space, or not. How do you see that sort of evolving in the past few years?
Yeah. So remind me again, what was your first question so I don't forget it?
Oh, I think I was just kind of getting at your a little bit your background, like what
Mhm.
got you interested in maybe
Okay,
blockchain to
okay.
begin with back, like 5 years ago or whatever, and then how that has evolved.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, what originally got me into crypto was just being broke. Honestly, that was the ultimate driver, or the kind of
Hmm.
a major driver in that. I graduated college, had a bunch of debt, needed to make money fast. The job that I had right out of college was not paid very well. I was working in a wet lab, in a small biotech company, and yeah, at the time, I mean, I had for a moment thought that I could maybe try to play like biotech stocks. Like, I don't know if you guys know much about like in the biotech space, you can, I mean, when it comes to stock trading, if a drug gets approved, then the stock goes like whoop, similar to crypto in some
Mm-hmm.
ways. So I thought maybe like because I studied neuroscience, that maybe I could read papers about these things and then I would be good at being able to tell if it would get like FDA approval or something like that. Turns out I was not good at that, and that was not something I even like remotely wanted to be doing with my time. But in that process, got found cryptocurrency again, or just like I had known about Bitcoin as just like something that you use to buy drugs online, and then but then at that point, Ethereum had recently come out, and what was being marketed with Ethereum with smart contracts were DAOs. So the idea of entities that are not owned by a singular person or group of people, that was decentralized and owned by the people who are all taking part in it. The usual example that people brought up was like, imagine Uber without the Uber company. And that was like, oh my, why are you guys talking about cooperatives? Like, why are a bunch of like libertarian, finance bros telling me that the next big thing is going to be cooperatives? And so like at the time as well, I was going through a kind of like political radicalization process, I guess, where Trump was recently elected. I had been a very big fan of Bernie Sanders in the run up to that, and was kind of wanting to then. It was sort of like, well, I like this guy so much, maybe I should read the primary source about socialism, and so I started. So to me, it was like growing up. I grew up in Texas in the South, where I was told my entire life that these books would say like horrible things about the world and that like they were somehow forbidden or whatever. And so for me, it was like very exciting then to read the primary sources straight from the horse's mouth and be like, oh wow, these guys are making a lot of sense about the world. And it was the first time that I had kind of read something that was speaking to something that I felt was missing in a lot of, I guess, more liberal discourse about what was causing certain societal issues that I felt was, yeah, just missing. It was just, it's very rare, I think, in liberal discourse to talk about class as like a primary driver for social inequalities. And so that was something that for me was really inspiring. And so me also combining that with like my nerdiness into like tech and biomedical sciences or whatever. I was always just kind of like interested in innovative tech and like new things. And so I think like for me, like I was getting into like more so when it comes to like when it comes to like socialist history, I was really interested in the history of cybersyn or of Salvador Allende in Chile, who had started a program to create a kind of democratically planned economy. So rather than being a American style kind of corporate economy on one side or Soviet style top down planning on the other side, they were trying to do this third thing that like no one had really tried before, but they had a lot of ambition. So I was really interested in the history of that. And so to me, blockchains and crypto were kind of like a clear connection with using technologies to not just be a facilitator of market interactions, which is normally how, I mean, that's basically what a platform is. It's also how many people conceptualize cryptocurrency as like this thing ultimately for finance or for the movement of money. But for me, it felt like actually this is a really good like base layer for not just that, but for having a kind of mutual understanding of like state generally. And to me, that means like democracy can also be a part of that, not just like financial interactions. That, you know, we have this trusted giant computer that can take in all of our inputs about the things that we want in our lives and that we want the economy to create in some way. And it can output potentially like the will of people. So to bring about the kind of economic democracy rather than necessarily a like intensification of financialization. But of course, like this is not something that was normally talked about in the crypto space and not normally talked about amongst critics of the crypto space. And so I felt like it was kind of like being stuck in this like downward spiral of people kind of talking in circles, and I was trying to just be like, what about this over here? And there wasn't much around it. And so I just kind of went insane and said, all right, I'll do it myself. Yeah.
Yeah, could you talk a bit more about that actually? Because I wanted to ask about, yeah, kind of how you see a better form of democracy, I guess, being possible with blockchain, especially. I don't know if it's more today than it has been, but I think for a lot of people today, it feels like there's less true
Mm.
democracy, more exploitation, kind of this also political elite, especially in the US, kind of emerging. So yeah, but how do you kind of see that as an opportunity? And are there any like immediate blockers? Like, can we unleash
Mm.
this like quickly, or what does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, I can't really purport to say that I've like concocted the, you know, the solution for democracy or the exact way that we should all vote and do everything together. But I think generally, as far as like principles for me, it's about making democracy more a part of normal people's lives or just like a normal thing in people's lives. So
Mm,
the kind of contradiction that a lot of like in the US and in the West and other countries as well, the contradiction that we have oftentimes as like democratic capitalist states is that we have a kind of political system that purports some amount of democracy and that you can vote maybe once every 4 or 5 years or something like that. Maybe you can vote locally. That's more frequent. That varies a little bit. But then in the economic sphere, we largely don't experience much democracy. Like you go to work, you go to a job, and the boss tells you what to do, and like the guy who owns the company like tells you what to do. And that's not like, for me, it's not about necessarily that there should be no hierarchy or there should be no, you know, someone who's above you that you listen to that like maybe knows what they're doing, but more so that we experience a kind of authoritarianism in daily economic life, or at least a lot of people do.
mm,
So we're constantly told that we live in a democracy, but we don't experience really that much democracy in our lives. Only, and so we associate democracy as like voting every, you know, 4 or 5 years, and then we go to work, and people, a few select amounts of people make increasingly more profits and money for their private self, and they can use that money to massively influence the supposedly democratic system itself, and many of the institutions that are kind of around it. So that's kind of like so then, you know, we have this kind of weird situation, I think, where you have people, a lot of them like associated with the right wing, who will say that democracy is failing, that politics is failing us, that actually we should just, you know, turn everything into a company, turn everything into a startup and run it as such. And that would somehow improve things. But for me, the contradiction is that we hardly live in a democracy in the first place, and that much of the reason that that is because economically we effectively do not have a democracy. And so um, the solutions that they're pushing in that way are simply to go deeper into the things that are taking away the little bits of democracy that we have in the first place. And so to me, it's about democracy looks like having a say in economic life, like having that, and that doesn't mean that like everyone has to vote on every little thing. Like absolutely not. I would hate that. It's more so like how can we think of ways to take in input that can help us understand what is the direction that we want society to go or what we want to do with our collective resources. Um, and so I think that can look like a lot of different things. I think it will take a lot of experimentation to know what works where and what doesn't. But I think when it comes to whether or how we do that with a blockchain, for example, or with these types of decentralized or distributed systems, I mean, the kind of thing that eventually someone comes to when they're thinking about democracy over a blockchain is the issue of identity, right? So that's kind of like why, I'm so like interested in holonym and the progress that you guys are making is because that is like a real question is how do we prove if we're doing like one person one vote for example or whatever 100 votes per person and they distribute their votes in some sort of complex system, how do we ensure or validate that this is like a single person and not several people or one person doesn't have several accounts because that's the default in the blockchain space. And so if you can make as many accounts as you want and they all have equal say, then there's kind of no purpose in doing that. So yeah, I think so those are some of the things that like I'm kind of interested in seeing and how they progress. For me, it's about making more democracy, not necessarily making everything political, but just simply like you know allowing for people to give input and figuring out what types of identity solutions can help facilitate that, especially on a decentralized system. Otherwise, we have the potential issue of a highly centralized one where you know a person that nobody likes is in power for whatever reason, but they have executive control over massive amounts of institutions and whatnot.
Yeah, which some people would say we're experiencing currently in the US actually. It's
Some would say.
eerily similar to what you're describing. Um, yeah, and I know that there are some projects out there that are kind of experimenting with these, I guess, other models of participation and consensus, I guess, more broadly. And also, you are a co-founder of Breadchain Cooperative. So, yeah, just wanted to hear a little bit more about that, how all of this sort of ethos fits into that, and kind of what you've learned as far as actually creating maybe like a new system even.
Hmm. So yeah, Breadchain Cooperative is a project that I started with a bunch of people in the crypto leftist online community. So it's just one of the ones that I started a few years ago, where a lot of us were talking about the cool things and nerding out about what blockchains can or can't do and whether that's interesting from a left wing point of view. To instead of just talking about it, to then get into the stage of doing something with it and trying to formulate or sculpt what would be the proper left wing response to the rise of like crypto and blockchains, with the kind of underlying idea that probably this is going to stick around. We can't really do much about it, whether you like it or not. How do we respond to this like new situation, and how do we kind of try our best to steer things in at least a different direction than what like the hyper financialization that a lot of crypto goes into. And so which is like a pretty grand thing to propose to want to do. And it comes with the immediate problem of like, how do we make money? Where do we get funding from? And so this also kind of is meant to answer for partially the problems that the left often has when it comes to donations, or like a reliance on donations as being a primary way that people give funds, or like something stays funded, which can work well in a moment, but then everyone kind of like runs out of money to donate. Like that's kind of, it's hard to have that type of sustainability if you're only going on donations often. And so what we came up with was what we call the Bread crowd staking application, where essentially it's a smart contract or an application that you give a US dollar stablecoin. So in this case, it's XDAI on Gnosis chain. And however much stablecoin you give is the same amount of bread tokens that you get. So one bread is equal to $1. And all of the stablecoins that you're giving gets turned into SDAI, which is the DAI savings rate, which accumulates yield, and that yield accumulates for the cooperative, and every month, depending on the amount of bread you hold, you have more say into how the yield gets distributed amongst the projects that are part of the network that are kind of politically aligned broadly. And so what it's meant to do is mimic a mix of a local currency system and a credit union. So bread is like our community currency. It helps it creates a kind of like boundary of where our economy is. But because we're using crypto, we have a lot of advantages in that people don't get too locked into it. They can always, like, there's liquidity always available to swap out, which is much more difficult to do in like traditional local currency systems. And you get to have a say in where that money goes. So oftentimes local currencies, and this is also how credit unions work as well, they receive normal US dollars or euros or whatever, and they make loans out to small businesses, and then they're paying an interest on the loans that they've received as a way to kind of create to develop like a particular place. But in our case, we are just giving sort of the excess. So we're not really, there's always 100% backing of all the bread that's created. And so, yeah, so it's kind of like, you could put a lot of your money in the bank, in which case the bank may be investing in, things that you may not necessarily agree with or want to have happen. You maybe don't want like more oil exploration or gas exploration and drilling, but if Bank of America or whoever else, if they know they're going to make money off of it, then they're going to do it. And so one way to kind of get out of that, of course, is things like credit unions, who generally will invest more locally, although not all the time. Or we have
Mhm.
this crypto option where you get to decide in a pretty easy way how that interest gets distributed and who you would like to keep funded. So that's kind of like our first like kind of flagship application, that to kind of the way that we've conceptualized this product is we use the term solidarity primitive. So in the crypto space, you have financial primitives, or you have like technical building blocks that people put together to create more and more complex financial products, like the ERC20 token, automated market makers, whatever else. They largely facilitate relationships of finance, of like a buyer, seller, like someone who's taking one side of a bet and the other side of a bet. A solidarity primitive is meant to try and get at technical architectures or technical bits that can be put together to create or facilitate relationships of solidarity between people. So that's kind of like the conceptual model of the types of things that we generally try to build. But yeah, the project itself has kind of in the past year grown in scope quite a bit. We released something called the Optimism Builders Dollar. So this is basically a white label solution of the crowd staking app, but for funding optimism public goods builders. So if you're someone who's into active in the optimism ecosystem, then that's a way to help fund those people there. We have like another project called Gas Killer, which is an AVS meant to do off-chain computation. So that's one that we've been building out for a little bit, and yeah, and a bunch of other different projects that we have going around. So the past year has kind of
Awesome.
accelerated a bit.
Awesome. Yeah, and I'm curious as well, kind of, and I think you mentioned this sort of contradiction. And I'm curious as well, as you were speaking about, well, I think both kind of, I guess, capitalism broadly and existing in this world today, but then also I think solidarity as kind of a both online and offline concept. So obviously we live in a capitalistic society, like even well, I don't know if all, but many people who are, fully, blockchain, crypto, Web3, you probably still have some sort of Bank of America account or some other sort of presence in the traditional economy.
Mm,
So I'm wondering how you see kind of maybe the products that you just mentioned that Breadchain is releasing, but how do you see kind of this transition, or is it going to be kind of a parallel pursuit for quite a while as far as yeah, maybe transitioning to a more equitable, sort of intentional economic model that we can live in? And I guess same thing for kind of solidarity. How do you see
mm,
us kind of, um, yeah, having this really beautiful online presence, but bringing it to the real world of solidarity and movement building and yeah, I guess cooperation.
mhm. Yeah, I mean, I think it's largely going to be parallel for a good while. It's hard for me to like point and say like, you know, socialism is about to happen. I don't think that's really we're in that situation, to be perfectly honest. I do think that there are, though, like going to have to be necessary responses to what seems to me at least a growing intensification of like the contradictions that capitalism creates, like rising fascisms in different places. I don't think that these things probably will end super soon. But with that being said, I think what it also means is that it's an opportunity as well at the same time. That I think we're kind of going through this process of people becoming very disappointed in institutions and are just simply looking for an alternative. And the right wing is like offering some sort of alternative. It's one that involves, of course, like, dislike of migrants or like what have you, and is an intensification of the things that people are not realizing are creating the reasons as to why these institutions are failing, I would say. But I think that is also going to fail, or there's going to be a lot of very bad consequences to that, and people are going to again be looking for something else. And I think, solidarity is something that I think just like humans intrinsically need. Like they need to have a feeling of connection and community to some extent to live happy lives. So yeah, I think that there is going to be a time, it just may take a while, where people will begin to realize this and have to move in that direction more. But I mean, for now, it's that probably it's going to be a more parallel thing that is happening as all these other things are unfolding, just because they're quite big forces on the move. And yeah, I guess the the kinds of things that I see in the crypto space. I mean, what's really interesting is they're the kind of progenitor, I don't know if that's the right word, but like the first events that really put crypto on the map was an act of solidarity. It was WikiLeaks losing access to their PayPal accounts and their banking and whatever else, and everyone donating Bitcoin as this like, fuck you to the American imperial state and whatever else. And
Mhm.
so, yeah, I think there is this kind of contradiction massively of certain types of people in the crypto space, generally who are more right leaning, but that's definitely not everyone. Who are there? I think there's just the types of people who are extremely vocal, but their complete detachment from what are the actual issues that are going on in the world, and trying to, in one sense, present cryptocurrency as like a depoliticized solution for political problems, whenever it's
Mhm.
always been a kind of like political statement, or it's always been like a political project to some degree. And I think that in the end, people will be kind of, they will like, if it's going to be I don't know, I have some thoughts on what would be some funny predictions to make. um that there is not like people don't want to gamble. Like that's not like a fun thing for a lot of people, and to think that this is the thing that people are going to want to do forever with cryptocurrency is like a kind of ridiculous idea to me. And so it's either, if you want your crypto projects to continue, like you'll probably have to adopt some amount of like I don't know socialism in order for people to actually use your chain, or just like at least lessen the amount of financialization. And I think the way that you do that and you create stickiness is by like having a community. And it's really I think there's limited gains in having communities solely based on gambling, if that makes sense.
Mm, yeah, definitely. And it also makes me think about like WikiLeaks, like you mentioned, or just kind of, I guess in this period of transition, there's probably, well, in any transition, there's definitely, whistleblowers. There's these sort of like radicals who may be sort of deities to some groups, and then these sort of, yeah, like demons to other groups. So, yeah, I guess my question is just kind of how you see the potential of these sorts of movements to protect those sorts of radicals or whistleblowers,
Mm-hmm.
if it's kind of with, yeah, like how WikiLeaks was sort of saved with Bitcoin, I think you said it was,
Mm-hmm.
or whether there's other forms of kind of safeguarding in some sort of, I don't know, with some other type of protocol or some other sort of movement that would kind of shield people from that, while also hopefully advancing the overall cause. And yeah, I think also, like you mentioned, like against growing authoritarianism, for example. So
Yeah.
yeah, just curious your thoughts on all of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think like kind of my argument to a lot of people on the left when it comes to why they should take crypto more seriously, I frame it as that if you're going to be someone who wants to challenge capitalist institutions, and you're serious about it, then there's plenty of examples to look around that the first thing that they do is they block your bank account. That's going to be like the immediate
Mm,
response from the establishment. And so
hmm.
cryptocurrency, you don't have to be engaging in gambling to use it, but by holding it or by having some of it, you at least protect yourself from it's like a hedge. It's like a matter of like risk.
Yeah. Mm,
If you're going to be like, I'm going to hold all of our funds in Bank of America, and then I'm going to go, do illegal thing here in order to protest XYZ, maybe protesting Tesla or something like that, then you're a sitting duck, right? Like you're kind of, and this is something that has also happened in the labor movement before, where labor unions will sometimes just put all of their retirement, like the members' retirement money or pensions or whatever, in a giant bank, and then they'll go on strike. But the bank also has a client relationship with the company, probably a much bigger one.
mm,
And so, like, all of a sudden now, all of the labor union's members, money is being blocked by the bank because they're getting a request from their big clients, the company that you're the union for, and all of a sudden you're fucked, and now you can't like do some basic things while you're on strike. And so you've lost all of
mm,
that labor power that you've had is kind of gone. So to me it's like there's it's not that difficult to imagine situations. And I mean, you read these types of things that happen on the news like fairly often or every once in a while. And so rather than being in a position of like, you know give me back access, or like pleading to authorities, like why not
mm.
give yourself the position where you can't, you know I mean, for the become ungovernable type of type of stuff.
Yeah, yeah, kind of getting outside the system or rejecting the system as best one can.
Yeah.
It's kind of a maybe a step along the path there.
Hmm.
Yeah. And similarly, I saw that you've been, well, obviously, I think mutual aid is a big opportunity here, and I guess that's quite similar to also what Breadchain is doing. And I'm wondering how you see kind of this. So if we're talking about bringing, humans and technology, or at least using technology as a tool to maybe get closer to our humanity, if we're being optimistic here, I'm wondering how you see kind of this. the opportunity for more mutual aid, and also as a way to almost like maybe combat this sort of compassion fatigue that I think a lot of
Mm,
people have, especially in this kind of movement. It's like, we've been
yeah,
protesting the same stuff for decades, centuries even.
yeah.
So yeah, I'm just curious your thoughts on that, especially like today with some of the biggest humanitarian crises, genocides, all these things happening. How do you see kind of that reality today and also going forward of using this technology to actually uplift humanity, hopefully?
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I think there's the stage one of mutual aid work looks that looks similar to charity, but I'd say is, it's arguably different of just kind of giving donations to various groups. And I've been heavily involved with sending a lot of crypto to those in Gaza. Crypto is like
Mm,
the one of the best ways to get money into Gaza, into those to get it into the hands of those who are actually there, and instead of going necessarily through an institution. Not that that's bad, but that, especially in this moment right now when we're speaking, like the a lot of the food kitchens and stuff are completely not stocked. They're just unable to give out any food, so things are getting quite bad. But yeah, cryptocurrency is a tool for things like that. I think is really interesting, and I've had some like very close up encounters with how this is going and how it's working, and it's also helped me, make inroads with the types of people that I think crypto could really help a lot. These types of people who are involved in activist groups and whatever here in Berlin. But so there's that, and kind of one of the things that like I would like to get at, and which is kind of done in how the crowd staking application works, is just from rather than it being a like making a donation requires you to like expend energy to like out of your day, like, attention and time to go and like go to your bank account or go to the thing and then like send the money here and find and blah blah blah. And it's like consuming, it's time consuming. It's also like you're like I'm sacrificing X amount of money to them, and it's like how do I even price that? How do I price like how much money do I give? If I give a little bit, does that mean I'm like a bad person? Like if I'm, whatever. And so my bet with like how the crowd staking application works is that it's a lot lower threshold of like amount of actions to take. It's like you can vote if you want to, but you don't have to. And it's just sort of automated that a portion of money that you are saving would go to the types of activities or the people, organizations that you would support anyways. You just don't want to like go back into your bank account and whatever and send another thing, or you don't necessarily want to do like a subscription type of model type of thing instead. Rather than losing, you're losing no money, you're keeping the same amount of money that you have, but you're just giving the interest that's being generated. So that's kind of like one direction I think that could be interesting or fruitful for more sustained funding, if these things are simply embedded in like technical systems that are completely automated. And then there are, yeah, I kind of like, for me, I see mutual aid as a kind of like base layer type of activity that helps build relationships for other types of things that maybe not everyone would engage in or everyone would do, but is like important for actually gaining power. Like mutual aid itself doesn't give you any power. It gives you relationships and it gives you like connections that you can make between people and people and trust with community. But it doesn't give you power. And so it is only with that like base layer of trust in a community can then you like ignite some type of organized collective power to go and do some sort of action, I think.
mm-hmm. And I know we're over time. Are you good for one or two more
Yeah, sure.
questions? Okay, awesome. Yeah, kind of thinking about power and I guess redistribution of power, which also is tied to um, I think knowledge and like information sharing. And I know you have a background in neuroscience, and I think you said biomedical engineering, something like that.
Not so much,
Um,
but more neuroscience. No, I did neuroscience and anthropology. Yeah.
oh, okay. Okay. Very interesting. So I guess actually both those things are actually relevant to my question, but I'm curious kind of how you see maybe the possibility for redistribution of power or just kind of general like human prospering through like science, for example, and then kind of as also, I guess, being involved in funding the commons. I know there's this really strong sort of artistic, like creative side of things. So just, I guess it's quite a general question, but just kind of curious your thoughts on all of what we've been talking about, but kind of related to, I don't know if it would be like DeSci or some other sort of
Mhm.
model, and also kind of the yeah creative maybe underpinnings of all of that.
I mean, yeah, at least so far, the I haven't yet found too many things in the DeSci space that I was particularly interested in or that I found particularly compelling. I think that it's kind of hard though. Like I don't know, for me, like the most successful DeSci project is Sci-Hub.
Hmm.
Sci-Hub is just like, I mean, completely
Mm,
changed the game when it came to having to get
yeah.
articles, and it's not recognized in necessarily the canon so much. I feel when I
Mm,
have heard DeSci related things. I interviewed, Alexandra, who founded it, and I mean the irony is that it's very not it's super centralized. It's like her doing it. It's just her
yeah,
basically, and
yeah,
maybe I don't know if she has a team or not, but
yeah.
you know, God bless her. Like I mean, she's never going to be able to come to the West probably ever, and we'll have to stay in Kazakhstan or the Russian sphere of influence or whatever, or other spheres of influence,
Yeah.
since she's being sued by all these different journals. But I mean,
Mm,
that's super successful, and part of her success is accepting cryptocurrency in donations to support her work, in part because she can't receive like money from PayPal or like other types of places. And so even though
hmm.
it's something that plenty of Western, academics also enjoy the fruits of, they can still
Yeah.
donate that support, and show that support with cryptocurrency. So I don't know if that in that sense it makes it decentralized, but yeah, I think
Mm,
I think that for me, it feels to me that there's a deeper issue in academia or in how science is done that is hard to kind of just use crypto to solve, or like I haven't yet seen it so far. I definitely appreciate like people who are trying, but I think there is still it feels to me more of a political problem than a technological problem, or like you can only get so far
mm,
with something that you build with technology in that space specifically. I think there has to be like, you know, like part of the problem is like funding just disappearing in part for a lot of people doing science. I mean, part of it is just
hmm.
like how the system is laid out for incentives and whatever. Like, it's the overall, like, I mean, in particular, I mean, in the US and Europe, I would say probably as well, but to a lesser degree, like, how much does the state actually support science? It fluctuates quite a bit,
Yeah.
and yeah, I think the then you just have people are only able to do science if there's a company that thinks that your science may lead to something
Yeah.
profitable.
Exactly.
So yeah, I guess I'm still, when it comes to like medicine and stuff, I'm like super skeptical of crypto being able to do much in that regard. But yeah, I don't know. I'm willing to be proven wrong.
Maybe it'll come to you like blockchain radicals kind of came to you because no one else was talking about it. So
Yeah,
maybe you'll figure that out. It'll be
yeah,
the
yeah.
sequel.
I mean, like there is, I think, and when I spoke to Shadi on the podcast, and he definitely had like a really interesting point
Mm,
about, I mean, his experience of getting into crypto from a scientific, like trying to solve
yeah.
certain problems and using IPF, like decentralized file storage, and in that regard, I think that's pretty
Yeah.
interesting. That is true. I guess I never had like
Mm,
necessarily conceptualized that as DeSci per se, but yeah, I will say that that was cool.
Yeah, yeah. No, there's definitely a lot to be explored there. And I guess that kind of actually leads into my last question about this sort of a lot of people talk about like tech techno solutionism and I think at the same time like accelerationism. So just kind of curious, and I think you mentioned in something I saw about techno probabilism.
Yeah.
So just wanted to kind of hear a little bit from you around that, and maybe also what that means for kind of getting this sort of conversation, this overlap between like leftist ideologies and blockchain kind of out of the group chat, you could say, how to get it actually into the real world, and maybe what sort of should be guiding that as far as not, falling prey to techno solutionism.
Mm.
So yeah, would love to hear any thoughts on that.
Yeah. So yeah, techno-solutionism was a term created by Evgeny Morozov, who a few years ago I got we had a little bit of a Twitter fight. But I mean the concept itself is not bad. Like it's overall true, or like it is a thing that happens where people it's kind of like I think sometimes it's overused on the left and people don't necessarily understand the term, at least the way that I understand the
Mm,
term. So maybe I don't understand the term, but the way that I kind of think of it more so is that it's like people it's like here's an app to solve poverty. Like people making apps and like these types of technical solutions for things that are ultimately like very big political issues, and then having a kind of like a pseudo radicalism with that, or thinking that it being the radical solution to poverty, that just nobody thought you just need an app, you just an Uber but for saving homeless people or something like that. So this is kind of an extension of a critique around techno-determinism. So
mm,
techno-determinism is just the idea that the way that technology progresses is what ultimately decides the trajectory of like human society. That it's kind of like it's also referred to as a California ideology, that like if as long as technology progresses, so does everything else in like a progressive
mm,
way. But there's I mean tons of critiques about this point of view of how the world works, that like it's a very deterministic type of way of thinking. It's sort of like and it's often one that is believed by a lot of tech founders and such like that
mm.
um
It's
it's
convenient that way.
yeah, it's like very convenient. It's like oh well, my tech company that's innovating in this thing is actually going to progress humanity. So it's like also this
Yeah.
self-aggrandizing type of thing.
Hmm.
um and so there's it's and then on the flip side of that, so kind of the other thing that I'm trying to the kind of like needle that I'm trying to thread is the flip side of this, where oftentimes, not all the time, in technological critique, often coming from the left, there is a kind of technological determinism in a pessimistic way. So
Mm,
usually, with the tech founders, it's a techno optimism, and then this term is not necessarily used very much, but I kind of describe what happens often on the left as like a techno pessimism, or it has been for the past few years as a reaction to the kind of definitely true, like way overly optimistic views on technology that happened throughout like the 2000s and 2010s. And
mm,
so yeah, this kind of tech lash that has happened has, I mean, in one sense, like it's good because now we're a lot more critical of these things that are being built. But on the other hand, I think sometimes it's throwing the baby out with the bathwater. And so rather than thinking that like technology is this deterministic thing, or like sometimes on the left you'll have a kind of what's called social determinism, that technology
mm,
doesn't matter and it's just humans that produce the world. And I'm trying to like make this in between type of concept, that like the use of technology to progress society is probabilistic, or that like the more organized group that exists in the context of that technology coming about will have more say in how that technology advances or progresses. So like if people are if like workers are organized in you know in the political economy that they exist in, and technology is introduced in that political economy or in that context or situation, then they will probably have a lot more say in how that technology is used. Will it be used to automate their work away and then like, lose their wages, or will it be used to reduce their working hours to keep the same wage? So at the moment, I think we largely live in a world where like the business class is more organized. Like it's less people to organize. They have a lot of money. They are able to do that. And so they are also the ones who are the main influencers of how technology is advancing. And so like part of this critique is also to say that like in the crypto space, we see like the technology around crypto is advancing in large part by the demands of capital. Like it's people who want to make more
Mhm.
money who are investing in the types of particular pieces of tech in order to make more money again, to make a return on their investment. So
Mm.
so like I'm saying that not all technology is necessarily one that's going to give you a good return on investment. That the way there are plenty of directions that we can go with this, but that we're not taking because capital. And so yeah, some of the things then that were like the one thing, for example, that I think made this very visceral for me was when we were making the crowd staking application, we had a particular voting system in mind for how things would be distributed, in which we wanted kind of like a live system where as people are giving their votes and their input, that is automatically updating and sending money in different ways. It was too, so one, we thought that this already existed because it seems really simple to us. We found out it doesn't
Mm.
exist, that it seems like there wasn't that much of an interest in the crypto space, largely in like a high fidelity type of democratic input system. And also the amount of computation that it took was pretty high. So we couldn't really do it, actually, because it would go beyond the gas limit of a block. And so
Mm.
then that ended up us having to change what the system is now, which is fine, but it has this kind of delay to it that we originally didn't want. And kind of the thing that we realized is that like this doesn't exist because like investors don't invest in this. Like we're
Yep.
building things that investors don't invest in. But then
Yeah.
it allowed us to innovate because then we came up with the idea for Gas Killer, which now is
Mm.
like actually like a product that can create revenue and
Mm.
allows for developers to build smart contracts that go beyond the gas limit. So then it's like this massive opening of the use of computation on a blockchain that then you can do more like higher fidelity types of computation without it being uber expensive.
Yeah, I think a few times this phrase has come to mind. I think it's necessity is the mother of invention. So I feel
Mm,
like there's been a few cases of that where it's like if the system isn't working, it'll maybe it's not quite possible just to escape it or to rebuild it in a snap of fingers, but there is something that can kind of inspire forward progress, but without, yeah, just throwing all the tech at it, actually having a more intentional approach to it. So
yeah,
that's super interesting.
yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
So yeah,
awesome.
a bunch of socialists were able to innovate in the tech space because they were looking at other things and just like gambling.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's actually, I think, the perfect note to end on. Thank you so much for your time. And I mean, if there is anything else you want to like plug that you're working on, or anything else that you want to bring up, you're welcome
Mhm.
to. But I think that's everything I had.
I guess it depends. I assume this probably may come out after Berlin.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
We have a few kind of, I'm not sure what the schedule is exactly, but it'll probably be, yeah, I imagine at least a couple weeks before
Yeah,
it's
that's
out,
sure. Nice.
and we'll keep you updated.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I mean, if you happen to have been in Berlin, then hello. But yeah, otherwise I'll plug my book, Blockchain Radicals. If you just search it, you'll find a place. They sell it everywhere. There's an audiobook as well. And my website is theblockchainsocialist.com.
Awesome.
Yeah.
We'll be sure to include that. And on that bookshelf right there is your book actually. So
Great. It's a little blurry, but I believe you.
yeah, yeah, we'll have to do a little spot on the video form of
Yeah.
this. But yeah, perfect. Well, thank you so much again, and looking forward to seeing you in Berlin and seeing Beth and everyone. So yeah, yeah, thanks again for your time and good luck with all the last minute preparations and such.
Yeah, of course. Thank you.
All right, talk to you later.
See
Have
ya.
a good weekend, I guess. Thanks. Bye.